Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation, Glenn, and the organizing committee of the Sunday conference. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give this presentation remotely. Unfortunately, for private reasons, I cannot come, so I'm very thankful for this opportunity. My talk, okay. Now it works. Is, as Glenn introduced, about the real costs of open access publishing and also the full potential when shifting to an open access paradigm. With the first slide, I would like to give you a quick introduction to Copernicus. I have to limit this. So Copernicus is a service provider in two segments. We organize scientific conferences since 1988, and in the mid-90s, we joined the publishing business. Why? Because we partnered from the very first beginning with learned associations run by scientists, for scientists, non-profit. And since we organized their conferences and we organized their back office services, they asked us to be also their publisher. And we had the great chance, together with these societies, to go very early into open access publishing, namely in 2001. So this year we celebrate 18 years of open access publishing. That means that in Europe, after Biomed Central, we had the chance to be the second publisher, putting the whole publishing business purely on open access. Nowadays, we have 41 journals, all peer-reviewed, most of them indexed in Web of Science with impact factors and so on. Most important is that 38 of these 41 journals are owned by learned societies. That's very important for us because this is our strategy. We were founded as a non-profit society, and this non-profit society still owns the Copernicus GmbH, the limited liability corporation, where we do the publishing business. So that's the reason why we call ourselves not-for-profit. And just to give you some numbers, in 2018 we had around 6,000 articles published. And very special for us is that we do all the service on our own. That's the reason why we have a relatively large amount of staff members here in Göttingen in Germany, of 54. Regarding myself, I'm by training a hydrologist and of course an open access activist. I'm doing also some work for other organizations, and I had the great chance to be a co-founder of the Open Access Scholarly Publisher Association. So the question is, of course, how do we run our open access journals? So I already said that most of the journals are owned by societies. That means the article processing charges, as we charge them to authors or their institutions, is determined by the society. Some societies, for example, when they are not in core STM publishing, but we have even some journals in HSS, so humanities and social science, sometimes it's not possible to charge any APCs to the authors. And then we have different models of institutional ownership or cross-subsidization, so-called community fees, and so on. Very important is that for all our journals, the chief editors are appointed by the owners of the journals, not by us. And the chief editors appoint the topical editors. The editors are not paid by us and are not employed by Copernicus, so have no relation. That means we have a clear separation between the scientific part, so the review procedure, and the business part, which is then for us all the publishing services, the production, the publishing, long-term archiving, and so on. That means, because one argument in the early days of open access was that pure open access publishers earn by publishing. That means my interest economically is to publish as many articles as possible. And then you can say, okay, but what is about the quality? Who guarantees that this is really good quality assurance? That's the reason why we said, okay, editorial policy and review decision is with the society, the journal owner, and we do the business part. We cannot accept articles after review. All our articles are published CC BY 4.0. Authors remain the copyright. We have all the classical services you get nowadays, full text XML and HTML, MathML to make even the mathematical content machine readable, and of course still the PDF for those who like to print out and read on paper. Of course, we use cross-sub services. Authenticate is a very important thing for us, a plagiarism check at the very first beginning. All our journals are members of COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, which is nowadays a big topic. We care a lot about publishing ethics. And of course, we use the well-established long-term preservation strategies from Clocks and Portico. Yeah, and Web of Science, of course, is very essential to our natural scientific journals. The take-home message here is that we say articles should always be owned by the author, not by any publisher or organization or whatsoever. And journals should be owned by associations and not by publishers. Publishers in an open access world should only be service providers. And if we do a good job, then people like to work with us. If we fail or our prices become too high, then we fail completely and kick ourselves out of the business. We see open access not only as a one-dimensional thing, we see it at least at the moment as a three-dimensional thing. The first dimension is, of course, the free access to the paper itself. That's easy, that's clear. Everybody knows, using very liberal distribution licenses like Creative Commons attribution. That's the standard. But in our second dimension, we started very early in 2001 to say, once we have open access articles, why don't we make the full peer review process also publicly available? And in terms of the commenting and reporting prior to publication, we even open it up to the scientific community. I don't want to go into detail, but the bottom line is in our what we call interactive public peer review means that we see the first version of the manuscript as a preprint. We see all the reviewer reports immediately when they are posted. We see replies by the authors, we see comments by the editors, and the scientific community is invited during 8 weeks, normally, some journals it's quicker, during 8 weeks to also comment on the paper, and then we have a final revision and then publication in the journal itself. And the third dimension, which is close to my heart as an open access activist, is open access to the assets. We always use this metaphor of a tree because your journal paper is just the trunk, but all around this is a whole other output of your scientific work, data sets, software and model code, videos. In geoscience, we also have international geoscientific sample numbers and so on. So all kinds of other research outputs, which should be linked to the paper and to each other through DOIs, and everything should be available. That's the reason why we say this third dimension is really the future and is very essential. So question is, of course, when we do all this stuff on our own, what are the costs? And I mentioned this earlier, most publishers, when you look into all the large publishers and even the smaller ones, most often they organize the peer review process, but when it comes to a production, which is still an issue, typesetting, for example, in earlier days, it was clear you had to do the typesetting to produce your printed issue. Now it's often said, well, typesetting can be done by the authors. We say no, because typesetting is not so much about layouting anymore, but it's about standardization and it's about structuring to go very early into XML to make it machine readable. So editorial support, typesetting, careful image processing, and of course, since we publish everything in English, language copy editing, which becomes more and more an issue because we are relatively international. This is all essential services, and most publishers outsource this to India and China to save money. We say no, why? We can do this on our own, even in very expensive Germany with our own staff members, well trained. We also develop all our review and publishing tools in-house because all our journals have very specific ideas how they want to see the review process done. And in order to be able to tailor this, we develop all this on our own. We use a license model. That means the owner of the journal, the society, determines what the authors have to pay. That's the external turnover. Then we have the internal turnover, where we agree with the society how much Copernicus gets for the whole publishing services, and the rest is then a surplus for the journal owner, namely the scientific association. Last year, our average was 1,300 euros net per article for 15 pages. These numbers already include that up to 10% of our annual pages we give away for free to the authors. We do not look only on the origin of the author, but our bottom line is we want to support authors lacking support of funds. If they have no access to publishing funds for open access, then we have, from our 6,000 articles and so many 100,000 pages, 10% are free for authors and they can apply for this. Now the question is, of course, we charge to the author these 1,300 euros on average. Okay, what happens to the income? This is the distribution. So what you can see is that almost a quarter of the income goes to the journal owners, namely the learned societies, and 3/4 is for our services. In the last 12 months, for example, we had about 64,000 pages which were charged to authors through APCs. This is a turnover of about 5 million, and 1.2 of these million euros went to the scientific associations as journal owners. In Europe, we always discuss about this magic number of 2,000 euros per article. European Commission says this. Most of the European national funders say this. The upper limit must be 2,000 euro. If we raised our APCs to 2,000 euro, this would generate automatically an extra income of 2.5 million, which would be unbelievable. Yeah. So that's the reason why, and this was what Glenn referred to in Berlin. My job was to say, hey, people, even 2,000 euro is too high. This is too much money, taxpayers' money spent on open access publishing. For those who are interested, of course, my presentation is CC BY. Therefore, please feel free to share it and to reuse it. And then you can also look here into the details where you can see how we spend our money. You see that marketing and education is a very small amount. Yeah, this is normally for many publishers much higher amount. Of course, typesetting, copy editing is very expensive because we do it in Germany, not in India and China. But marketing, for example, the good thing is, since we partner with the scientific associations, there's not so much we have to do, and actually, at least in our natural science community, you should be very careful when you approach scientists, because you get on their nerves very quickly. And the good thing is, since we partner with the associations, we have an automatic, of course, an automatic marketing through the people. If they get a good experience in publishing with us, they will tell the people. If not, of course, they will also tell the people. So real cost summary and the take-home message for you is, yes, we use modern technology. Most of this is developed by our own. I think we can say that we have top quality journals with even high ranks in Web of Science and so on. But although we do all of these kind of things, we are able, and other publishers would in principle be too, to generate substantial surpluses for associations and for the publisher, even in a high-wage country, for less than 2,000 euros per article. That's the key message. And then, of course, the question is, since we are so much in open access, if we think about the full open access paradigm, what does it mean? I mentioned earlier that we think at least about these 3 dimensions of open access publishing. I think it's very essential that everybody who is involved, the societies, the funders, the publishers, but especially the librarians, because the librarians play for us a very important key role in terms of bringing the open access idea to the authors. We have many very well-informed librarians who have internal service units for their university or for their research center, where authors come and say, I would like to go open access, what should I do? And then librarians share the words. And I think it's very important in this process to always train the scientists to say, open access is not only free access to the article. Make sure that you put your paper on discussion publicly. Of course, you get also negative feedback, but this is good. This can help you shaping your article, and make all assets of your research work publicly available. That must be absolutely normal in a full OA paradigm. What I also think is important is, for funders especially, to take into account is, if we talk about a proper open access market, please do not do the same mistake STM publishing has done during the past decades, where this was really shaped towards a very small number of very large publishers, literally monopolies. But open access funding must clearly also focus on alternative models, on society models, and on alternative publishers. This is very important. What I also think is important that as we agreed in open access to bring the ownership of articles back to the authors, I think it's also important to bring the ownership of the journals back to the society, to non-profit associations run by scientists and not run by publishers and economists. So this brings also money back to science, which is brilliant because the research was financed by taxpayer money, the article processing charges, our work is financed by taxpayer money. There must come something back to science to fund all the non-profit scientific activities like outreach, education, and so on. And of course, when we talk about a full open access paradigm, then we also talk about the existence only of pure open access sources, not of course only journals, also books and others, but it must be from the very first beginning, the source itself open access, and we cannot continue with hybrid journals. That can clearly not be the goal, and also that people are forced to go the way through the preprint servers and institutional repositories in the way of green open access is good for a transition phase, but on the long run, of course, everything must be purely open access and available for everybody. This, of course, is also in accordance with Plan S. And with these slides, I thank you all very much for your attention, and I'm happy to get your questions.
Hello, my name is Sibylle Geisenheiner from the Royal Society of Chemistry. You said the APC should be below 2,000 euros. So what is your standpoint about the deal negotiations in Germany and an average par fee of £2,750? How do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was exactly the reason why I was invited to this Berlin Fortune conference, where it was about the deal negotiations, because I wanted to share that I think we can say that we have a relatively good established publishing business of 25 years, and we have, of course, we're not as large as the major publishers, but we have a substantial amount of journals and articles we publish, and we think that if you organize the model differently so that it's not 100% surplus driven, but you organize it like we do in a not-for-profit way, that in principle also for the others, Springer, Nature, Elsevier, Wiley, it would be of course less expensive. What we do at the moment is they try to bring the income up, they try to reduce the costs, and they try to put the net surplus to a maximum. And this cannot be the idea of scientific publishing. So I think it must cost not even 2,000 euros.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions? Right, Martin, I really do appreciate what you presented. I'm sure everybody else did and found it very informative. Thank you for zooming in, and thank you for keeping well below your 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much.